Hooray, hooray. I am Vadim Open Yoga. This is our festival on the Black Sea. Our 2 yoga classes considered are reading aloud. Yoga is writing. This is, as it were, the third part of our presentation. And let's refresh our memory once again with such a very interesting thing as a completely new tool, I am. As an additional, very powerful tool for the development of the mind, for the development of concentration. Extremely powerful, how to say, working with my speech and with texts. Working with, how to say, with subtle movements of the hands when you write something down. This is directly related to the activity of the brain, as modern scientists tell us now, but in ancient times these were techniques. Absolutely good techniques. Let me remind you that when you read aloud, you struggle with internal dialogue, with internal thoughts, with some such parasitic phenomena. That's when you read to yourself. You can really substitute one word for another, or your thoughts can fly far, far away. And it's hard to focus on what you're reading, on the meaning there, on everything else. Therefore, such a rude, once again, this is quite a difficult exercise of reading aloud, very difficult. It will be easier for you then to practice Hatha yoga of such an ascetic nature than this yoga of reading aloud. And the related one, let me remind you, yoga is the yoga of writing. That is, together they make up a kind of joint instrument, when you can write and say out loud what you write. And this increases concentration even more. All of these methods were prescribed. In general, there is an interesting history of the spread of these methods, as much as we can imagine the way it was before. But on the other hand, I want to emphasize here that these are purely practical methods in everyday life, especially if you go into science. If you suddenly one of you decided to go into science, into serious physics, well, other natural science subjects. Although in general, strictly speaking, it is extremely desirable, or rather vital, whatever you do, to have a piece of paper, a pen, and preferably say out loud everything that you are studying. That is, they opened a textbook there by Landau, Lifshitz, some kind of quantum mechanics. And you start not just reading like a detective, but you start literally reading aloud and taking notes, and sometimes even rewriting. Not being shy, not being ashamed of the fact that you are not doing it to yourself. I can once again tell the story from my personal life, that once upon a time, a very long time ago, I entered MEFI. MEFI is a very serious university, at least it was then. Completely fool-free, completely ferocious, there were items there, and they were required. And the very first thing, in particular, that we were told that, guys, reading a textbook while lying on the couch like a detective is a waste of time. You just won't pass the exams, you'll be out, you won't understand the subject. To study, I remember we were trained like this because, you know, people come to MEFI, well, many like me. And there is absolutely no small town there, and, well, you know, there are no such skills yet. And then it seems, well, since we are so great, since we are in MEFI, we must therefore read half a page from half a glance. We're great, aren't we? Well, indeed, many people came there from physics and mathematics schools, and so on, and so on. And there's no, stop guys, stop. Such cases do not take place here. You'll be out. I remember, God willing. So, good health, all the best. Good luck to all our teachers, mentors, curators. They demanded from us. For that, here is a bow to the ground for what was demanded. I remember the curator of our group gathered us. This is the story. There was a group of 20-25 people somewhere. I don't remember how many now. He says, well, guys, in general, experience shows that only half of you will finish your studies. We gave up like that, looked at each other. Well, the reality turned out to be really more severe. 1/3 of them graduated. And not because they were even so ruthlessly kicked out. No, they're at least from the 10th time, you could retake and continue to study, because everyone understood that it was hard to study. Learning must be hard. But simply because the people understood that it was not theirs. You know, always what is called dharma is not their way of life. So, this skill, yes. Even if among scientists it is considered immoral to do something with a piece of paper and a pen. Of course, a person who has never trained his mind looks absolutely ridiculous and thinks that if he sprawls in a chair there now, he will get some thick textbook on mathematical analysis, there or on physics, or some other exact subjects. Or, for that matter, on some difficult section of yoga, like yoga dancing, the Eightfold Path. That here he is now, like this, I will lie, leaf through, read, and now I will become the greatest of the great. Nothing like that. The mind begins to slide. You begin to substitute one word for another, one association for another. As a rule, we substitute. Now we have something spinning in our head, and we are not so much reading as trying to see what we once saw or knew before. That is, any pre-established knowledge that revolves in us, it is, well, critical for our karma. We begin to perceive the entire universe based on those impressions that were before, from those knowledge, from those semantic loads that were before. And this terrible thing actually determines our fate. We just can't see. We have blind spots formed and automatically filled with what was before. It means that it can be extremely difficult to deal with this. Well, a leaf, a piece of paper, a pen comes to the rescue. This is this technique, when you retire and start working on whatever it is. Sometimes I had to work through lectures in this way, and then the result is good. The degree of concentration, well, that is. Then at least there is some result. If this is not the case, if everyone considers it, well, as if it is above their dignity to take notes or write something. Especially in the modern era, let me remind you, everyone has mobile phones. They say, and now I'm going to record this lecture on my mobile phone, and then I'll come home and listen to it again. Yes, at least 1,000 times listen to the presentation of some section of the field theory really there. It will simply slip away. That is, you need to sit down, concentrate, disconnect, and reproduce yourself. Therefore, this thing here in terms of reading yoga and writing yoga, here it is each separately, and even when it works together, extremely powerfully.
Она каждая по отдельности, а еще когда вместе, работает чрезвычайно мощно.
All of this, I remind you, resulted in different, well, indirect methods. A few more questions about the inscription. Yes, yoga reading, my favorite example. I'm going to write 3 words now. I'll write 3 words, and you. It will be seen there, gaze. Now I'm going to write 3 words and take a look at them. So, what did we have there? Third, yoga. And so it is. Yes. Look at these three words. Well, for those who may be there, who do not have. I wrote the word yoga in three different ways. The first layer, and O-G-A. The second way is E with two dots, G-A. The third way, and, then again E, then G-A. And in fact, when we say yoga, yoga, it doesn't feel like any combination of sounds. But if you take a look, something familiar, native, understandable, something unfamiliar, harmful and terrible, will immediately catch your eye. Yes. And this is also such a powerful component of the practice when we perceive writing as what is called yantra. There is a certain section in yoga called yantra yoga. Here is this topic: what if you do this or that practice? Well, India, she loves all sorts of religious comparisons, religious analogies there. That if you do this or that practice without yantra, the gods will be dissatisfied with you there. There, you know, for a long time you can declare that you will not have a concentration of mind, that perception will begin to wander. Well, try, yes, here inform ordinary people. They won't even understand the full extent, therefore, of their fall, of all the horror of what is happening. And that's why, you know, they come up with quite such biting, but lucid moments like this. Everyone, the gods will be displeased, you're all over. Yes, so this is really this factor, when you write by hand, and what you write turns into some kind of living image in itself. Extremely strongly allows, well, to strengthen the concentration and perception of the text. Moreover, you know, literacy problems are connected with this. Let's say, here in Russian. Well, they artificially dragged, let's say, a writing system, and there may be a huge number of discrepancies in the spelling. And there are languages, like Arabic, Sanskrit, and so on, where, let's say, well, Sanskrit is a syllabic letter, and in some cases there are fewer discrepancies, fewer errors, that is, it is perceived more and more adequately purely visually, yes. A separate big topic. It is extremely important, but we are interested in how to reconstruct yoga from a practical point of view, so that you can hone your mind in this life and get closer to something beyond. Do you remember the yoga approach? First learn, and learn. Hone the mind. Logic. Not a permanent study, no matter what. This is a question, if you will, of the survival of your species. Well, not of the species, of the genus. And if your family does not cultivate an emphasis on the development of the mind, will there be another stratification, or an evolutionary leap, as it usually happens? Well, it seems like everyone is the same, but they begin to share according to some acquired. Evolve. Others freeze, with all the negative consequences. Therefore, you will often hear, why do we need physics? Why mathematics? Why do we need to sharpen our brains? We somehow lived and lived well. It means that our children too, like they don't need it all. Yes, but this is a very short planning horizon. Look a little further away, and suddenly you find out that just like a person who can't read and write now, well, just doomed. He's just doomed. He has no place here. and it
И это
becomes an
становится
integral part.
неотъемлемой частью. Точно
In the
так же
same
мы не
way,
знаем, что будет
we don't
требовать
know
от
what
нас
the
в
future
будущем.
will demand of us.
Так
So,
вот,
yoga of reading
йога,
aloud,
чтение
yoga
вслух
of
и йога
writing should be very
письма
strong, well,
э,
as if used
должны
strongly.
быть очень сильно, ну, как бы, использоваться сильно.
There are
Есть
still some
еще
points
такие
that need to
моменты,
be
о которых
mentioned.
надо упомянуть.
Let's
Допустим,
say
если
if
кто-то
someone
читает
reads
вслух,
aloud, how
насколько
ethical it is to correct
этично
him.
его поправлять.
In
Вообще
general, the
западный
Western
такой
approach is
подход,
unethical.
это неэтично.
That
То есть, если
is,
вы
if you
приедете
come
куда-то на
somewhere to the
Запад и
West
начнете
and start
по-английски
speaking
говорить,
English,
да так,
so much
что
so that you twist,
коверкать,
poke,
тыкать,
what
что
did you
ты
say
там
wrong
сказал
there?
неправильно,
And
а
there
уж
is no
такое
such
понятие,
thing
как
as an
акцент, вообще
accent
не
at all.
существует.
But in
А вот
cultures
в
like the
культурах
former
типа бывшего
USSR, no.
СССР нет, вам
You will
вас
be
будут
poked, you
тыкать, ты
said
сказал
wrong.
неправильно.
Complex
Комплексные
numbers or
числа или
complex numbers.
некомплексные.
And a whole
Целую там
science is being bred
науку
there.
разводят,
How
как
to speak
говорить правильно,
correctly,
как говорить
how to speak
неправильно. Яйца
incorrectly,
выеденного
it's
не
not worth
стоит
it
все это,
all.
но
But we are, in
мы с
general,
вами, в
social
общем-то,
monkeys.
обезьянки социальные,
Our
мозги
brains are
наши
a little bit
немножко
like
такие,
that.
как бы вам
How can
сказать,
I tell you,
пугливые.
timid? If
Если
someone
кто-то
from
из
the herd
стада
said that you
сказал, что ты
somehow
как-то
look like this, it
выглядишь,
means that you stuck
если
out your
слишком
tail
сильно
too
там
much there.
оттопырил
Or
хвост
shouted not in the way it
или
is, in
прокричал не
general,
так, как
supposed
это,
to
в
be,
общем-то,
we
полагается,
reflect
мы
on it
это
too emotionally.
рефлексируем излишне эмоционально,
And
и
it's
это такой,
like, you
знаете, как
know, like an
отпечаток
imprint
на
for
всю
life
жизнь потом.
afterwards. You
Вас
were pulled
одернули,
down,
оно там
and it was printed there.
пропечаталось.
Well,
Ну,
monstrous
чудовищные можно
consequences can be
последствия
obtained,
получить,
so in the
поэтому на
West they understand
Западе это
this.
понимают, и
And some
какая-то такая
kind of
вся
whole
культура,
culture
так
is
она
so
более
it is more
аккуратная.
accurate.
Если вы
If you
хотите,
want to
чтобы
be
вас
corrected,
поправляли, скажем,
let's
вы
say you are
изучаете
studying a
иностранный язык,
foreign
уехали
language, you
куда-нибудь
have
в
come somewhere
Германию,
to
в
Germany,
Англию или
to
в
England,
Соединенные
or
Штаты
to the
Америки,
United States of
вы
America.
должны
You must
однозначно и
unequivocally and
недвусмысленно
unambiguously
своих англо,
ask your
допустим,
English-speaking
говорящих
people
людей
to correct you,
попросить, чтобы
well.
вас
That's
поправляли. Вот
it,
это вот,
well,
ну, как бы
as if it
наглость и
were
хамство
arrogance and
ходить
rudeness
и
to
учить
go and
русскому
teach the
языку
Russian
всех, кто об
language
этом
to
не
everyone
просил,
who
это
didn't ask for it.
исключительная, ну, вот эта
This
вот
is exclusively,
быдлячая
well, this
такая
is a
вот,
redneck linguistic tradition of the former CERT.
быдляче-лингвистическая традиция бывшего СССР.
And you
А ты
said that
неправильно
word
сказал
wrong,
это слово,
and
а
you
ты
put the
неправильно
stress wrong.
ударение поставил.
Yes,
Да
let's
давайте
speak
говорить
correctly.
правильно.
You
Начинаете
start picking.
ковырять, а как
But
же
how is it
правильно,
right? Well,
просто
they're
они так
just so used to
привыкли.
it. That
То есть,
is, to what?
почему? Ну, есть какой-то
Well, there is some kind of
устоявшийся
established canon that we are used
канон,
to.
к которому мы
This is
привыкли,
not
это
a
закон
law of
природы.
nature.
Но
But to
навязывать,
impose,
если вы
if you
начнете
start
навязывать
imposing
что бы то ни
anything,
было,
is a disaster.
беда.
The
Та же
same
самая
situation is
ситуация
even
еще
more
даже более
ridiculous
смешная,
if you
если
find
вы
yourself
окажетесь
in
в Индии.
India, because everyone has the
Потому что у
idea in
всех в
their
голове
head that this
представление,
is
что это
India,
Индия такая
such a
монолитная
monolithic
страна,
country where
где все
everyone
говорят на
speaks Sanskrit,
санскрите, где в
where there is a
Гималаях сидит
supreme pope
верховный
sitting in
там
the
какой-то там
Himalayas,
папа
such a
римский,
Mahatma
такой
Gandhi,
Махатма Ганди. Э,
and
Все
everything
там
is unified there. And if you
унифицировано,
got
и
there,
если
they
уж вы
gave you some
попали
kind
там
of
на
mantra,
какую-то мантру,
then
вам
that's the
дали, то
only
она
way it
только так и
sounds.
звучит. Если
If there is
какой-то
some
обряд,
kind
то
of
он только
ritual,
такой,
it is
если
only
какое-то
like this,
написание,
if there is
только
only
одно.
one spelling.
И западные, ну,
And
такая, знаете,
Western,
чисто такая
well,
вот
this is such a, you know,
пуританская,
pure sectarian, religious
религиозно-тоталитарный взгляд
totalitarian view of the
на мир.
world. And you
И
will
вас
be
ждет
deeply
глубочайшее
disappointed that both the
разочарование,
writing
то, что
system
и
and the
система
system, well,
написания,
like sound transmission. So let's say,
и
yes,
система, ну, как бы, звукопередачи, так что ли скажем, да.
that there is
Что
often no
никаким
smell of
санскритом
Sanskrit
в
in our
нашем
understanding
понимании
there.
там зачастую не пахнет,
A
гигантское
huge number of
количество
dialects.
диалектов.
Even languages.
And,
Причем,
well, this is
ну,
a
это
separate
отдельная
topic.
тема.
India
Индия — это
is a
лоскутный
patchwork of
одеяло из
states.
штатов.
A man
Человек из
from
одного
one state
штата не
doesn't
понимает
understand.
желания
A
тема для
dissertation topic, you know.
диссертации, понимаете?
And if you
И
are trying to reconstruct the
если вы
knowledge of
пытаетесь
yoga, well, don't
реконструировать
try there.
знания
You
йоги,
know,
ну не пытайтесь
usually
там
a
хотя бы, что
person
там
comes there,
приезжает человек, он
finds
где-нибудь
an
находит
Indian
место, вы
village,
там
there
какое-то
is some
место
local,
начнет,
so
гуру
this
там
guru
чему-то
teaches
учит.
something there. Why?
Почему? Ну,
Well,
потому что
because
вот
that's
он
how
так
he studied
учился и
and
300
300
лет
years before
до
him.
него-то, а в
And in the
соседней
neighboring
деревне
village,
совсем всё
everything is
по-другому.
completely different. And this
А этот
means
такой,
that a
значит,
connoisseur
знаток
comes
приезжает
here
сюда
somewhere
куда-нибудь
and
и
starts
начинает тут
teaching
йоги
yoga
всех
to
учить,
everyone
значит,
here,
той
as it
деревеньке или
means from that village, or
произношению, или
pronunciation, or
написанию, или
spelling,
какой-нибудь там
or
еще
some other
практике
kind of
начинает,
practice
какой-то
begins with a
религиозному
religious as with a fanatical belief.
с
Yes, this is
фанатическим
also a big
уверованием, да. Вот
difficulty.
в этом
So be
тоже
careful.
большая трудность. Поэтому аккуратнее.
I constantly quote Vivekananda that India is a big dump with diamonds on it. If you're bringing something from India, bring diamonds. There is no need to bring garbage here, there is enough of your own. Religion makes us sick of the locals. You Indian people will also bring this obscurantism to us here. That's why it makes it quite difficult to reconstruct the knowledge of yoga, of all the valuable things that we can know with you, including such practices of reading and writing. If you write, then in what language? Everyone is shouting Sanskrit. Sanskrit is there, I don't know. What about Prakrit? And what is this? Yes, or there's Ivanagariva Nagari shouting there. What about Brahmi? And what is this? Well, open Wikipedia, read it, if you're really lazy, yes. That is, you can find various variants of technique, practice and pronunciation of pronouncing the text aloud, and writing, and, well, if they are well established, you are lucky to get something somewhere in India, but stick to it. That is, well, great luck, if they really have such a living tradition there and you have it. You understand, yes, a purely human desire to elevate your direction there, your sect, your religion, your people, your clan, your locality. This is very often everywhere, and you will meet absolutely fantastic statements. That our yoga school is exactly 1,000,000 years old the other day. It's not today, tomorrow, we will celebrate the anniversary. Or this writing, here it is so canonized and so on, so on. Well, India is such a country, you know, well, not to say a myth from creativity, but this is a separate topic when, you know, a person creates his own inner world of role-playing games. Some kind of Harry Potter, yes, and here he lives in this or whatever we have there. In my time, Tolkien was like the Lord of the Rings. Here they were all dressed up like these goblins. Yes, the locals were fighting there, talking about something there. Such, you know, such an inner world is created, imagination. Everyone in your village picks up this picture of this inner world. And do you remember that a person has such a property of wonderfully reviving everything that he believes or wants to believe? And when there are, well, I'm sorry, there are 24 more adepts. You can completely create your own, so to speak, closed virtual universe in the form of one or another belief, in the form of one or another cult, one or another means of writing, pronunciation, and so on. And the most amazing thing is that it will work to some extent, but it really immediately falls apart if the adept changes his mind, or everyone runs away. Yes. Yes, so what else do I need to cover here in connection with? Yes, then there are related questions about technique, extremely powerful techniques related to yoga. Reading, yoga writing is questioning. That is, when you give a push, well, there are, you know, questions that you constantly ask. This is a common practice. Let's say the question is, who am I? And an attempt to answer it. And moreover, the louder and more serious you are, write yourself a letter out loud, send it by mail, receive it and read it out loud. Good practice, write. Write yourself a letter to the future. This is a general practice. It is the same, by the way, as in many other branches of thought. Here we were talking about Buddhism, let's say Zen Buddhism, Chan Buddhism. There, if you remember, there is a clap, there is a blow of two hands. Ask yourself, what is? Which is what a one-handed punch means. Yes, that is, these are, you know, like riddles, statements that make your mind wake up, start spinning and concentrate on it. I also remind you that it is very difficult to awaken the mind.
очень тяжело бывает пробудить.
And the
И
practice
практика
of reading
чтения
aloud
вслух
or
или
speaking
проговоров
or
или
writing
письма
awakens
чрезвычайно
the
сильно
mind extremely
пробуждают разум.
strongly. Here
Вот
you
вы
woke up in the
проснулись с
morning.
утра,
You don't
очень
think
чуть
anything at all.
соображаете.
The practice
Крайне
of reading
полезна
aloud is extremely useful.
практика чтения вслух.
Or you
Или
feel
вы
bad,
себя
so you
плохо
don't feel your
чувствуете, вот
body.
вы не чувствуете своего тела.
Start
Начните
writing
что-нибудь
something.
писать.
Why?
Почему? Потому что
Because here are the
моторика
motor skills of
руки
the hand
и
and those
все
sections,
разделы
areas of our
области
mind, that are
нашего разума,
responsible for
которые за
this.
это
They are, in principle, just
ответственны, они,
as
в принципе,
responsible
точно
for
так
the
же
awareness
ответственны
of the
за
sensation of the rest of the
осознание
body.
ощущения всего оставшегося тела.
It's
Просто
just that our
кисти рук
hands
у
are
нас
probably the
наиболее
most well
хорошо,
represented in our
вероятно,
mind, but if this
представлены в нашем
happens,
разуме.
you don't feel the
Если
body. You got
бывает
up
такое, не
sleepily,
чувствуете
you hooked
тело,
something
встал с
there, some
просонья,
kind
там
of
что-то
mug fell.
зацепил, какая-то кружка упала,
This is
такой
the whole
весь
one.
этот самый,
You
не
don't feel it, do
чувствуете
you?
себя, да. Вот
Oddly
как ни
enough,
странно,
you start writing and excite
писать
those, probably
начинаете
centers.
и возбуждаете те, вероятно, центры, но
But
это
this
объяснение
explanation is completely from jealousy, of course.
совершенно современности, конечно.
Of course there.
Там,
Yoga of
йога
Dikshas.
дикшей. Значит,
So, what is Yoga Diksha?
что такое йога дикша?
What does the
Означает
word
слово
Diksha mean?
дикша.
Of
Безусловно,
course,
много
this word
значений
can have
может
many
быть у этого
meanings.
слова. Одно
One of these
из
words is
этих
like an
слов
initiation, as a kind of impulse to transfer knowledge, as a kind of push, which
посвящение,
is transmitted from
как
teacher to
некий
student,
импульс
after
передачи
which the
знания,
practice begins to go much faster. And the
как
result
некое
is
такое,
achieved very
некий
serious,
такой
downright
толчок,
magical.
который передается от учителя к ученику, после чего практика начинает идти много быстрее, и результат достигается очень серьезный, прямо-таки волшебный.
Another meaning of the blessing.
Yes,
Да, ну или
well, or in the
в
meaning of a
значении
blessing, which
благословения,
is
что
like,
типа,
well,
ну
that's it.
вот все,
We
мы
see
видим
there,
там,
you
что
are a
ты
good
там
person
хороший
there,
там
and
человек,
so let
да, и
everything
вот
be fine with
пусть у
you.
тебя все будет хорошо.
This is one
Одна
of
из
the
самых
most difficult
тяжелых тем,
topics, completely ambiguous, closed,
совершенно
I would even say
неоднозначных,
scandalous.
закрытых, я бы даже сказал скандальных. Причем
Moreover,
скандальных не
scandalous ones
только
are
на
not
Западе,
only in the
когда там
West,
проникает
when
то
one
или
or
иное
another teaching, or
учение,
one
или
or
то,
another,
тот или
let's
иной,
say,
скажем,
religious
религиозный
cult,
культ из Индии сюда
comes here from
приезжает, и
India
давай
and let's
развивать
develop violent
бурную
activity.
деятельность.
Well,
Ну,
it's
везде
the same
одинаковый
scenario
сценарий.
everywhere.
Вы
You've
тут все
all been
прозевали,
vegetating here,
вы тут
you're
все,
all
значит,
fallen souls here, and now we're going to
падшие
convert you
души, а
so
мы
to
сейчас
your
вас
true
будем
faith,
обращать,
to
значит,
your true
свою
religion,
истинную
and
веру,
for this you
свою
have to
истинную
do this,
религию.
this, the
А
fifth,
для
the
этого вы
10th,
должны то,
and
все,
without
пятое,
that you will die.
десятое, а без этого вам смерть.
And
И
so, well,
поэтому,
no one
ну,
can
никто не
figure
может
out what
понять,
to
в чем
dig deeper
глубже
into.
копнуть.
Term. The term is
Термин
closer
ближе
to
к
Vedic times, it's more like Panin.
ведийским временам, это скорее упанаяна.
In
То
other
есть
words,
упанаяна
Panin
это
has it when they
когда
confirm that you are a member of the
подтверждают,
highest
что ты
castes.
вхож в высшие касты.
I
Я
remind
напоминаю,
you,
в Индии
there are
3
3
высшие
upper
касты,
castes in
так?
India, so, that is, it is connected there with other separate rituals.
То есть это связано там с еще другими отдельными обрядами.
It is
Тоже
also
считается,
believed
что
that if
если
you
ты
did not
не
pass this
прошел
rite
этот
at
обряд
Panoyanas there,
упанаяны, то вроде
then
бы
it
так как
seems like
ничего
you can't
и
know
знать ты не
anything,
можешь, и
and
не
you shouldn't,
должен, и
and
как-то
somehow
не в
it's not
порядке.
okay. And
И
with
вот
this,
с
of
этим,
course, well,
безусловно,
as if we
ну, как
reconstruct
бы,
the
если мы
system of the Vedas,
реконструируем
if we
систему Вед,
reconstruct the
если
system
мы
of yoga,
реконструируем систему
and we
йоги и
really want to
хотим
purify it from
действительно
obscurantism,
очистить
from
ее
what
от
does not work,
мракобесия, от
and
того,
this
что
is
не
characteristic
работает,
of people,
а это
once
свойственно
again, to
людям,
cast a shadow
еще
on
раз,
weaving,
тень на
then here we
плетение
must
наводить.
remember that this is, let's call it
Но
yoga
тут
at
мы должны
Panayana, yes, or yoga
помнить,
diksha
что вот
has
это
its
вот,
own, in fact,
назовем ее йога
quite specific
упанаяна,
historical
да, или
goals,
йога
and
дикша,
how dramatically everything changed during the
имеет
transfer of
свои, на самом
knowledge.
деле, вполне конкретные исторические цели и насколько все драматически менялось при передаче знаний.
I
Я
remind
напомню
you
вам,
that,
что,
as it seems now,
как сейчас
initially
видится,
knowledge was
изначально
kept exclusively in the family tradition,
знание
and
хранилось
in Vedic times.
исключительно
You know, the most magical ancient Vedic
в
times, it was
семейной
believed
такой
that mom
традиции.
and dad give you
И
life,
в
they also give
ведические
you
времена,
initiation.
такие самые, знаете, волшебные, древнейшие ведические времена, считалось, что мама и папа дают вам жизнь, они же дают вам и посвящение.
In
То
other
есть именно
words,
они
it
вам
is they
дают
who give you the
посвящение,
initiation, this
вот этот вот
push, in
толчок,
addition to physical existence, but
помимо еще
also, as it
физического
were, this
существования, но еще
spiritual
как бы вот это
existence
вот
or
духовного
spiritual initiation in
существования или
practice.
духовное посвящение в практике.
And it
И
was
это было
strictly within the
строго
framework,
в
as if
рамках,
within the framework of the generic.
как бы в рамках родовых. Потом
Then,
по
as
прошествии
time passes,
времени,
because of some
из-за
processes,
каких-то
we see how
процессов
it
мы
begins
видим,
to
как это
separate,
начинает
that mom
разделяться,
and dad give you life in general,
что мама и
but
папа дают
this is
тебе,
initiation
в
into teaching,
общем-то,
initiation into
жизнь,
yoga is already
но
given
вот
by
это вот
someone else of your
посвящение в
kind.
учение, посвящение в йогу дают уже кто-то другие представители твоего рода.
Well, as if it were
Ну, как бы
already a
уже
little
как бы
bit,
немножко как
as
бы
if
дальше
further
от
away
тебя.
from
То есть
you.
вот
In other words,
разделяется этот
this
момент,
moment is
что
divided, that as if
мама,
mom
папа
and
в
dad
одном
are in
лице
one
и
person,
твои
and your physical
физические
parents
родители
and
и
your
твои
spiritual
духовные
teachers,
учителя,
you
тебе в
basically
принципе
don't need
больше
anyone
никого не
else.
надо.
In general,
Вообще.
in other words,
То есть
your
твои
mom
мама и
and dad
папа
are,
это,
if you
если
like,
угодно,
the
сам
absolute
абсолют.
itself.
Все, все остальные лишние.
Everyone else is superfluous.
Значит, но
So,
потом
but
вот
then
что-то
something
начало
started to
происходить,
happen that,
что как бы,
as it
да,
were,
жизнь вам
your
могут
parents
дать
can give you
родители, а
life,
вот уже
and
с
now
вот
with
этим
this
духовным
spiritual push,
толчком, с этим,
with this
как
kind
бы,
of
как это,
transmission
импульсом
impulse,
передачи,
that's
вот
hard.
тяжело.
And
И,
so that's
значит,
what's
вот
next.
дальше.
Then
Потом
even further, as it were, they begin to be
еще
traced.
дальше как бы начинают прослеживаться. Ну, по
Well,
всей видимости,
apparently
там
we
их
are trying
пытаются
to reconstruct
реконструировать
this purely on the
чисто
basis of such a consistent theory of that.
исходя
Why
из
have we reached such a life?
такой непротиворечивой теории вет, почему вот мы дошли до жизни до такой.
Then
Потом
it
стало
got
еще
even
хуже.
worse. Different groups
Разные
of
группы
people
людей
became
стали
interested in
по-разному
knowledge in different
интересоваться
ways.
знаниями, они
They were
расслоились
stratified
на
into
3
3
касты.
castes. And
И уже
already
все то,
everything
что
connected
связано
with
с
initiation
посвящением,
has become the responsibility of the
стало
highest caste.
обязанностью высшей касты.
That
То есть
is,
мало
it's
того,
not enough
что
that you
ты
are born.
рождаешься,
It's not enough that, that
мало
is,
того,
they even
что,
already give you initiation.
ну, как бы,
Even
ну, то есть
representatives of not your
даже
closest
уже
ancestral environment,
посвящение
but
тебе
as if
дают
distant
уже даже
relatives.
представители не самого ближайшего твоего родового окружения, а как бы дальние родственники. Вот ты
Here,
должна
we
очень
have to
четко
represent the 3 highest
представлять три
castes
высшие
very
касты.
clearly. In
Они, в
general,
общем-то,
they are related,
это
as if they were
родственные,
originally
изначально
considered
считалось,
related
это
people,
родственные
but simply
люди,
because of life
но
circumstances,
просто в силу
they began to
жизненных
weigh down.
обстоятельств они начали тяготеть. Кто-то в
Someone
большей
was more
степени
drawn to
тяготел к
something
чему-то
higher,
высшему, к
to knowledge,
познанию,
to something
к чему-то
spiritual.
духовному.
Someone is
Кто-то
so
так
average, and
средненько, а
someone
кто-то
is
совсем
very weak.
слабенько. И вот
And so there
произошло
was a
разделение на
division
3
into 3
касты.
castes. But in
Но, по
fact,
сути
how
дела,
would you?
как бы ты,
They are
они
closely
близко
related,
связаны,
and there are
какие-то
some initiations.
посвящения,
They were
они
common
до
to all
определенной
3
степени
castes
как-то
to a
были
certain
общие на
extent.
все 3 касты.
As something separate,
Как
well,
что-то
as if they demanded,
отдельное,
let's
ну, как бы
say, from the
требовали,
highest
допустим, от
caste of
высшей касты
Brahmins.
брахманов,
But
но
they
уже
no
не
longer demanded
требовали
from
от
other
более
castes.
других каст.
And
Чтобы вы
so that
поняли
you
логику,
understand the
логика
logic,
следующая.
the logic is as
Чем более
follows.
высшая
The
каста,
higher
тем
the
тяжелее
caste,
твоя
the
жизнь.
harder your life is.
Чем
The
более
higher the
высшая каста,
caste,
тем
the more the
больше
child had to
ребенку
learn.
приходилось учиться.
Learn
Учиться с
from
самого
early
раннего
childhood.
детства.
The
Чем
higher the
более
caste,
высшая
the
каста,
later
тем
he
до
studied.
более позднего срока он учился.
That
То
is, a
есть
small caste, well,
маленькая
I learned
каста,
a
ну
little.
чуть-чуть
That's it,
поучился,
I'm
все,
free.
свободен.
High
Высокая
caste,
каста,
you have to
ты
study.
должен
There are,
учиться, там
well,
есть
there are
ну,
different canons
разные там
called,
каноны
different terms
называют,
are called.
разные сроки называют.
Well,
Ну,
in
в
particular,
частности,
one of the sources says that if
в
you
одних
are a
из
Brahmin
источников,
there,
что если ты там
then you have
брахман,
to
то ты
study
там
there
до
until you are
24 лет
24.
должен учиться.
No
Никакой
family, no
семьи,
kids,
никакой,
and you won't
никаких
learn it
детей, а
yourself
ты
yet.
еще сам не выучишь.
What
Что
will you
будешь
produce
платить,
if
если
you
ты сам
yourself
еще
are still
не
ignorant,
уч, да?
right? But
А
for
вот
lower
для
caste
более низших
registers,
каст,
no,
нет, там
it's
уже
already
это
different
все
there.
по-другому, там
There are
более
softer
мягкие
requirements and the
и
training period.
требования, и периоды
Why?
обучения.
Well,
Почему?
a
Ну,
person is not
склонен человек,
inclined
что ж
that it
насильно,
will be
что ли,
forced or
вот,
something.
да, йога и
Do you
это в первую
remember?
очередь
Yes,
свобода,
yoga
ну,
and the Vedas
кто ж
are
будет
first of all
насиловать?
freedom. Well, who will rape something?
Вот, потом
Then later, if we
дальше,
reconstruct this
если так
situation in this way,
реконструировать эту
then the fourth
ситуацию,
caste
то
appeared.
появилась 4-я каста.
She
Она,
is
по всей
apparently,
видимости, уже,
already, as
как
we
бы
would
мы
say,
сказали,
genetically
генетически
excellent.
отличная.
That
То есть
is, some
какой-то
other people.
другой народ.
Well,
Ну,
since they
так
lived
как
together
очень долго
for a very
вместе
long
жили,
time, his V was
его
recognized as a caste.
признали как кастой,
Caste
каста
shooter.
Шудр.
Then
Потом
on.
дальше,
Yes,
да, ну
well,
и
and
как
as
бы
if the caste
каста
of the
Шудр
shooter. No one has dedicated knowledge to the shooter caste anymore. It was believed that if you are a Shura, no, you should not be given no. You should not hear the word of the Veda at all. Why? Well, that's how we can reconstruct now, because there have been some monstrous abuses. Not because everyone is evil, there are wanted something for themselves there, but some monstrous abuses. But life is life, all the same, everyone was secretly mixed up. Then there were other people around, people who are outside of castes. That is, even the most caste shooter seems to be the lowest caste. But it sounds proud in relation to the fact that a person is out of caste. There could be no talk at all about any dikshas there. None of these paeans means there and other things, because, you know, that's the very name untouchable. Yes, God forbid you are there next to him somewhere there. Somehow you will find yourself there on the side of ideas. Again, why? Well, because this was a purely historical situation like this. In the future, there was a mixture of castes. We don't know why this happened. Well, in particular, in the Mahabharata, in the Bhagavad Gita, this is indirectly stated. Some kind of civil war took place, the men were killed, but they stayed around. Well, the women stayed, the women did not fight. As follows from all these epics, at that time it was only in our modern era that women in the army were fighting there. But then they did not fight. Here the women were left alone, so it began that they took themselves, well, how to mix with representatives of lower castes, which was categorically forbidden, not because everyone was evil, but because it was believed that if a woman of a higher caste and a man of a lower caste, this woman fights with this man, be it sickens her, and him, and all of humanity. Here a man could afford to marry a man more. Well, a woman of a lower caste, and that is also different, but somewhere it is considered that only one caste. And here is such a mixture of castes. And what do we see with you? We see in general, well, from the point of view of the transfer of knowledge in general, a thing well, as if monstrous. Because this is even further away from the ideal, where mom and dad are your spiritual teachers. Because in your family, an incomprehensible child may be born for mixing castes. That is, he can with a soul that does not strive for the highest, and he simply will not accept the teaching, transmission, and so on. Yes, because everyone is free. And how do castes differ? The fact that a person's self-awareness is in pursuit of the highest, it is different. Someone remains in this rock expression of the person himself. Actually, this is how castes were formed. And imagine that if a soul is born in your family, well, it's unclear, because of mixed marriages. Karmic lines of cause and effect are different. Well, in other words, the big tragedies have begun, and what do we see? We see that, let's say, this is what a banana is like there, where transmission strictly within a caste or one kind has already stopped working. It may happen that a child will come to you there in the lowest Radhatiya, the soul of a Brahmana. From a formal point of view, he has no right to receive the knowledge of initiation, but in fact, you are obliged to give him. He came into this world for this. Or on the contrary, in a high caste of some Brahmins, a soul is born, there, I don't know, an untouchable one, which begins to freak out, do harm, and so on, and so on. And now we are faced with the first such very serious change in the structure of knowledge transfer in this Diksha Yoga, yes. That in general your origin is completely separated from those people who give you an impetus in knowledge. That is, you can be of one caste, and your teacher is completely different. You are not related at all, but the transmission was triggered. Well, what can I do? Yes, unfortunately, we need to talk here already. To whom? Who needs to leave, because, well, here we need to, yes.
А,
It
Значит,
means that in this way,
и
first of
вот
all,
таким
we have
образом
moved even
мы
further
как
away
бы,
from the
во-первых,
ideas,
еще дальше
from the
отошли
original
от
idea, but
идей,
also numerous of
от
these already
идеи
know and already
изначальной,
more ceremonial
ну
components
и
have arisen.
возникли многочисленные вот эти вот уже, знаете, так уже более обрядовые составляющие. Дальше
Furthermore,
больше.
so
Значит,
look, yes, that
смотрите, да, то
is,
есть вот
here
вы
you are born,
родились,
you have to look for a
вы должны
teacher.
искать учителя.
You
Вы
have to
должны
come to
прийти к
this
этому
teacher so
учителю,
that he
чтобы
can
он
teach
вас,
you,
так
so to
сказать,
speak.
научил. А,
He may
Он
not be
может быть
your
вашим не
relative, but you
родственником,
have
но
to
вы
show
должны
him some kind
выказывать
of
ему какую-то
loyalty,
свою
to
преданность,
differ in
какими-то
some qualities.
качествами
Because if you are
отличаться.
stupid and
Глупые и
evil,
злые, ну,
well, of
понятно, никто
course,
вас учить
no
не
one will
будет, да.
teach you.
Ни о каком
There can be
посвящении, ни о
no
какой
question of
дикше
any
и речи быть не
initiation,
может.
of any diksha. And
И
everyone
все
rushed to
ринулись
look for
искать, значит,
teachers, so.
учителей.
And
А
then
дальше
it got
еще
even
хуже
worse.
стало.
This is
Вот
a
это вот
very
очень
important
важный
point.
момент.
You have to
Вы должны
understand
очень
very
четко
clearly.
понимать.
And
А
you
ты
try,
попробуй найди
find
еще
this
этого
teacher
учителя.
again. You
Ты
can
можешь
live your
всю
whole
жизнь
life
прожить
and
и
not
не
find it.
найти его.
Or you
Или
can
ты можешь
go
так
on a trip
отправиться в
there, go
путешествие, всю
around the whole
страну
country
обходить
and
и
not
не
find a
найти себе
teacher.
учителя. То
That
есть
is, there is still a
еще
real
реальная
danger of
опасность
interrupting
прерыва
knowledge.
знания.
And
И
what
что
comes to the
выступает на
fore?
первый план?
These two
Выступает
yogas,
план
which
вот
we
этих
talked
две
about,
йоги, о
come to
которых
the
мы
fore.
говорили.
Yoga of
Йога
writing
письма
and
и
yoga
йога
of reading
чтения
aloud.
вслух.
Because
Потому что
teachers,
учителя
for
тоже
their
со своей
part,
стороны поняли
also
эту
understood this
опасность и
danger
начали
and began to
записывать
record knowledge
знания
in the form
в
of
виде
texts,
текстов, в виде
in the form
трактатов.
of treatises,
А
and
чтобы
so
никто
that no
ими
one
не
abuses them,
злоупотреблял,
because no matter
потому
what you
что,
write,
чтобы вы,
someone will
вы
immediately
напишете сразу,
say,
кто-нибудь
"Oh,
скажет, о,
this is
это мое,
mine,
это
this
я.
is me." This practice, and
Такая
it still
практика, и
exists
она
today,
существует
you
до сих
should
пор, вы
understand
должны это
this.
понимать.
Stuffing
Вброс
texts.
текстов.
That is,
То
O
есть,
Panki, you are an adept.
ты
You are
адепт,
looking
ты
for
ищешь
some kind of
какое-то
knowledge,
знание, а тебе
and
говорят,
they
вот
say
там
to
текст.
you, here is the
Ну,
text.
более, допустим,
Well,
ярко
let's
это
say it
выражено
was more
потом было,
pronounced later
когда
when the tantras began to
тантры стали
spread.
распространяться.
You're
Вот ты
looking for
что-то ищешь, а
something,
вот она
but here
тантра.
it is on
И
tantra.
типа, а кто
You're like,
написал?
who wrote it? And
А
no one
никто не
wrote Shiva
написал, там
himself
сам
there,
Шива ее это
proclaimed
самое
it and threw it on the
провозгласил
ground.
и бросил на землю.
There is
Есть
such a
такой
verse,
стих
a mantra in Ananda
в
Lahara.
Ананда-Лахари.
Shiva
Шива
learned
узнал,
how
как
to
управлять
control
всей
this
этой
entire
вселенной
universe
благодаря
through the
знанию
knowledge
этих
of 64
четырех тантр,
tantras,
каждая из
each of
которых
which is a part of
часть
your
твоей
Svatandra,
сватантры дает
gives
свое
its own
собственное
separate
отдельное
perfection.
совершенство. Затем по
Then, at
твоему
your insistence,
настоянию
he threw, well,
он
it means
бросил,
the goddess's
ну,
insistence,
это
he
имеется в
threw
виду
this
богини
tantra on the
настоянию,
earth,
он бросил
which
эту
absolutely and
тантру на
alone
землю,
gives
которая
all the goals
абсолютно
of
и
human
одна дает все
existence.
цели человеческого существования. То
In
есть
other words,
уже
they have
поняли,
already
что вот эта
realized
вот
that this
связь передачи
teacher-student knowledge
знания
transfer connection is
учитель-ученик
bursting at the
трещит по
seams.
швам.
Therefore,
Поэтому
texts began
стали
to appear,
появляться тексты.
and the
И
text
текст
was of a
носил
sacred
сакральный
nature.
характер.
This, by the
Это,
way,
кстати,
echoes in
отголоски в
Europe.
Европе. Знаете,
You
как
know
там
what kind
книга
of spell book
заклинаний,
we
да?
are there. Yes,
Получил
that
всё.
is, that's all. Well,
Ну,
wizards used
волшебники
to, you
пользовались.
remember, right?
То есть
That
всё,
is,
значит,
everything means that out of
ниоткуда,
nowhere, a text or
вроде
comments to the
ниоткуда
text appear
появляется
out of
текст.
nowhere.
Либо комментарий к тексту.
Because
Потому
to
что
judge,
посудите, если
if yoga was
Йога-сутра
danced in the
Патанджали,
morning, it does not
нигде не
follow
следует,
anywhere
что
that they danced,
Патанджали,
it
значит,
means
это
that yoga
йогу
was
придумал.
invented. The structure of
Структура
yoga in the
Йога-сутра
morning is a
Патанджали — это
digest.
дайджест.
He
Он
researched the
исследовал
materials that
те
were known at
материалы,
his
которые
time,
были известны на
summarized
его
them, and
момент,
said,
обобщил их
"Friends, this
и
is my
сказал:
vision,
друзья, вот мое
darshan."
видение. Даршан.
So, what
Значит,
do we
и
have
что мы
with
с
you?
вами имеем? Мы с
We
вами
have the
имеем
next
следующий
stage,
этап,
when a
когда
book, a
на
text
первый
comes to the
план
fore.
выходит книга,
Kananda has a good
текст.
saying that all
У
religions are
Лехана
divided
есть
into two
хорошее
parts.
высказывание, что все религии делятся на две части.
Those
Те религии, у
religions that
которых
have a
есть
book,
книга,
they flourish
они
and
цветут и
flourish,
процветают,
and
и те
those
религии, у
religions that
которых
do
нет
not have a
книги,
book,
они
they
имеют
tend, therefore,
склонность,
to
значит,
disappear.
исчезать.
And it
И
was
это
really
было
serious
действительно
know-how that
серьезное
the
ноу-хау,
teacher-student personal relationship
что
began
вот
to fade
как
into the
бы на
background,
второй план
and all the auxiliary work
начинали
was
уходить
done by what are
личностные
called
отношения
books, texts that,
учитель-ученик,
in general, it is
а всю
unclear where they came
вспомогательную
from.
работу выполняли то, что называются книги, тексты, которые, в общем-то, непонятно откуда брались,
That's how it
как бы
is in a good
по-хорошему.
way. And here, that's it. Here is
А
such a
вот
text.
всё, вот есть
Everything.
такой текст.
Who
Кто
wrote it?
написал? Да
Yes,
никто не
no one wrote.
написал. Собственно,
Actually,
там даже
there is
такая
even such a
традиция, что если
tradition
вы
that if you
спросите,
ask,
кто Веды
who wrote the
написал,
Vedas,
ответ
the
такой:
answer
Веды
is,
никто не
nobody
писал.
wrote the Vedas. Vedas. The Vedas resound in the higher realms. The Orishas heard them, and simply so, in a language that is understandable to you. The Rishis heard, turned into speech. in a speech and proclaimed, yes. And so we, well, for a long time, knowledge was once again passed orally from teacher to student, but then, when everything got really bad, this yoga came to the fore. Reading.
Come on, later.
There's a microphone. Not that. Yes, we need to think of something. They always fall. I always catch them. Yes, so the following thing turns out. So, with whatever heavy as books, texts began to perform an integral part. That is, if you are, no matter what caste you are, you were born from a mixed marriage, or you are a hereditary Brahmin there. In any case, if you start with a book, with a text, you start studying, reading, rewriting this book for yourself. Then you do all the auxiliary work with a capital letter. Here is such a wow, as it is said in the Vedas. Everything is wonderful too. You have to meet the person who, well, roughly speaking, read this text before you. And this person should read this text aloud to you so that you can read it aloud yourself later. That is, you know, such as the emphasis or concentration of knowledge transfer. Here, pay attention to how she fell. First parents, then relatives, then a representative of another caste, then it's not clear who. Then the text, then the one who, well, reads the text out loud, yes, then no. First you read the text yourself, then you search. You read it, but what if you didn't understand it? Well, the text is there, the text is available. Have you read it? No, but it is necessary that someone alive, who has already studied this text before you, read it in front of you. And this is considered an initiation. Here is one of the meanings, including the word Diksha, as initiation there into mantra. Initiation into texts, initiation into teaching. Here it is like this. And then you yourself, well, as if you have to, I have to read it out loud, so that it reaches you better. Rewrite it so that you have a copy. I remind you, there were no printers. That's what I wrote down to myself. I didn't write down yours either. Well, for memory, and everyone has a leaky memory. Here. And this is a kind of logic. And it is different in different teachings, currents, some of its own. Sometimes we won't whisper a secret mantra to you there. You won't achieve anything there, and so on. But as you understand, there is also a thing here. The higher self of each person is made in the image and likeness of the Absolute, who created this whole world. And it is no different from the higher self, the ancient rishis and teachers. The potential in each of you is the same, and you have to be ready to unleash this potential. Here, moreover, the emphasis is very serious, and all from the intermediary. That is, even someone who does some, well, helps you do some practice, he does not do it for you. He helps you to do it so that you can achieve something one-on-one with the Absolute. But this has a very bad effect on the earnings of numerous sects. Therefore, they seem to be from afar. Well, if our guru gives you, then if you are in our company, well, roughly speaking, he will direct the financial flow through himself. If it's coming through us, then yes. And what did you expect from them? People are people. In other words, the history of India, and, in general, as the history of mankind, you know, bursts of something highly spiritual, which immediately degrades, becomes overgrown, you know, with absolutely disgusting flies that want to feed from this. This is common. Well, this is our world. Here it is. This is peace, freedom. That's why here it is also necessary to be aware that on the one hand, if you really met a teacher, and the teacher dedicated you there or read some text to you there, you are very lucky. But,
Но,
strictly
строго
speaking,
говоря, вы
you can stumble
можете
upon a
натыкаться
huge
на
number of
гигантское
crooks who will
количество
want
злодеев,
power,
которые
money,
захотят
and
там
so on there.
власти, денег и так далее, и
And they will
будут
pretend to be
себя
God knows
изображать
what,
бог знает чего,
in the
в
hope that you
надежде,
will
что вы
become their
станете, значит,
follower,
их
which means that
последователем,
you
что
will
вы
bring money and
будете,
respect
значит,
to them.
деньжата
And,
и уважение
unfortunately,
нести
what can I
именно им.
say, there are
И, к
enough of them
сожалению, что
too.
там говорить, таких тоже хватает.
Especially, you
Особенно,
know,
знаете,
here
вот
is the
разница
difference of culture.
культуры.
The Western
Западный
man is
человек
rich
щас
now,
богатый,
the Eastern
восточный
man is
человек
still
щас пока
poor
еще
now.
бедный.
Here,
Вот,
well,
ну,
such a
такой соблазн.
temptation.
Такой
Such a
соблазн
temptation to
придумать
invent a
религию,
religion
что вот
that everyone came
все
and brought
приходили
money.
и деньги несли.
And of
И,
course,
конечно,
this smile causes,
это
yes,
улыбку
well, as it
вызывает,
were,
да,
well,
ну,
there
всё
are
равно
still
есть
gullible followers.
доверчивые
I don't
последователи.
know,
Не знаю,
it's not
не
for us
нам
to
судить,
judge whether
хорошо
it's
это,
good,
плохо там и
bad
так
there,
далее, и так
and
далее,
so
но
on and so on.
общее
But the general
положение
position
нет,
of
если мы
vet,
то говорим,
if we
это
say so,
положение
is the
того,
position
что
that your
ваше
higher
высшее
self
я ничем
is
не
no different
отличается от
from the
высшего
higher
я
self of any
любого
teacher.
учителя.
And in
И, по сути
fact,
дела,
when you find a teacher,
когда вы
you find a
находите
reflection of
учителя,
your
вы
higher
находите
self,
отражение
and not
своего
something
высшего
brought
я,
from
а
the
не
outside.
что-то
Do you
привнесенное извне,
understand?
понимаете.
When
Когда
you
вы
find a
находите
teacher,
учителя, вы
you see
видите
the embodiment of the
воплощение
absolute
самого
itself in the human
абсолюта в
body,
теле
but not
человека, но
something
никак
else.
не чего-то
And if you
другого.
don't have it yet,
А если у
here
вас
you are
нет, так
faced
что
with
вот
the
вы
teaching,
сталкиваетесь с
the flow of a
учением,
person,
течением
and
человека,
here
а
I
вот
am very often
я
talking to
очень
people.
часто с
A big
людьми
problem of
разговариваю,
these
это большая
Western ones.
проблема
I said I was in
западного.
India.
Я, говорит,
Well, I
был в
saw a
Индии,
guru
ну,
talking
видел
to
там,
me
мне
there.
говорят гуру,
And
а
I
я
look at
вот
him.
смотрю, ну
Well,
вот ну, не
he
вызывает
does
это
not cause
меня
me a thrill of the
трепета
soul.
души. Вот ну
That's
не
not
вот
you.
ты.
And I,
А
he
мне,
says,
говорит,
need
надо
to
себя
force myself.
заставить,
I
надо
need it
там
there.
это. А вот
Here
не
I do
вижу
not
я
see
ни
any reflection
отражения
of
своего
myself,
я,
nor
ни
absolutely do I see it
абсолюта в
in
нем
it.
не
Yes.
вижу, да? Может быть, у
Maybe
меня
it's my
такая
bad
карма
karma.
дурная. Может
Maybe
быть, так.
so. Or maybe it's
А
not
может
your
быть, это не
teacher.
ваш учитель.
Maybe
Может быть, и
so.
так. А
Can
кто-нибудь
anyone
может в
figure it
этом
out?
разобраться?
No.
Нет.
Only you
Только
can
вы сами
determine
для
for
себя
yourself
можете
whether a
определить,
teacher is a
является
teacher,
ли
but the
учитель
evidence of the
учителем,
rest of the
но
world, they
свидетельства
mean
всего
absolutely
оставшегося
nothing.
мира, они ровным счетом ничего не значат.
Or only
Или
you can
только вы
determine
сами
for yourself,
можете
the one who
определить, тот,
gives you
кто вам дает
knowledge,
знания,
whether it is
является
a
ли это
reflection of your
отражением
higher
вашего
self
высшего я, которое
that helps you
помогает вам
realize the
осознать
higher,
высшее,
or again
или
you are
опять
in
же вы в
illusions.
иллюзиях.
No one can do
Никто
anything to
ничем
help,
помочь не может. Потому
because
что
even here
даже
is
вот
such a
такое
situation
положение, что
that the apple
яблони по
tree is on the
яблокам,
apples.
да,
Yes,
но а где
but where is the
критерий?
criterion? Where
Где
and
в
what
чем
should
он
it be
должен
expressed?
выражаться? В
In some
каких-то
cases,
там
the
должно
sky
небо
should open up
разверзнуться там
there,
или
or
что-то
something should
что-то
happen there
должно
purely
произойти
physical.
чисто физическое.
Well,
Ну,
you
знаете,
know,
тоже вот
sometimes people
иногда
are also addicted to
тоже люди
miracles,
падки на
superpowers,
чудеса,
miracles.
на
But you must
сверхспособности,
remember,
чудеса. Но вы
if a
должны
person
помнить, если
demonstrates
человек
superpowers,
демонстрирует
it does not mean at
сверхспособности,
all that it is a
это вовсе не
manifestation of the
значит, что
absolute,
это проявление
or a
абсолюта
reflection
или
of your higher
отражение
self.
вашего высшего я.
Why?
Почему?
Because
Потому
if you
что
were
если бы вы
there,
там, не
I
знаю,
don't know,
столетия
half a
назад
century
взяли
ago, you
мобильный
took a mobile
телефон и
phone and
позвонили,
called,
это тоже
it
бы
would also
выглядело
look
как
like a
чудо.
miracle. You understand,
Понимаете, да?
right?
Вот наш
Here's our
мобильный
mobile
телефон
phone
для
for a
человека,
person who
который не
doesn't know
знает,
it. It's a miracle.
это чудо,
But
но
this
это
is in no
никак не
way a proof of
доказательство
something
чего-то
superlogical, or,
сверхлогичного
as it
или
were,
как
a
бы
reflection.
отражение. Вот
This is
эту
the
вот
thing
вещь
that
надо
needs to
очень
be
четко
remembered very clearly.
запомнить, поэтому
Therefore,
вот в
in such a
какой
hierarchy as the
иерархии, как
acquisition of knowledge, it is an
приобретение
integral part of
знаний,
the yoga of reading aloud, and the
неотъемлемая
yoga of
часть
writing,
йоги чтения вслух и йоги письма.
because
Потому
they're
что
kind of
они
like.
как бы как
Until
до
you
тех
met
пор,
your
пока вы не
teacher.
встретили своего учителя.
On the
С
other
другой
hand,
стороны, если
if someone
кто-то
is already
где-то
somewhere
уже
before you
раньше
in some
вас в
topic,
какой-то
he is not
теме, он не
necessarily
обязательно
your
ваш
teacher.
учитель, но
But
если
if,
он,
roughly
грубо
speaking,
говоря, при вас
he reads
читает
this text
вслух
aloud
этот
in front
текст,
of you, it reaches
до
you
вас
better,
доходит
and you get
лучше, и
even
вы
closer
еще
to it.
ближе приближаетесь к этому.
And that's what
И
this whole
вот
thing
на
is
этом
based
вся вот
on,
эта вот,
well, like a
вот эта
factory of
как
enlightenment of the
фабрика
East, it is
просветления
built on.
Востока, она и построена,
That
что
what you used to get at
то,
birth
что
from mom
раньше
and dad is
вы
now turning into a
обретали при
lot of this
рождении
kind
от
of
мамы и
soup-like
папы,
technology.
сейчас превращается в такую ступенчатую какую-то эту
Yes.
технологию. Да,
Why?
почему?
Well,
Ну,
as
как
explained,
объясняется,
it
значит,
means
так
that in the
как по этому
tantras on this
поводу
occasion,
сказано,
it is
что
said that the
наступила
epic of
эпоха Кали,
Kali, Kali
Кали-юга.
Yuga, has come.
Теперь
Now
несколько
I
слов
want
я
to
хочу
say a few
сказать
words of the
следующее,
following,
чтобы
so
тоже
that they
поняли, что
also
это не что-то
understand that this is not something that is extremely important. Well, exclusively Indian, it is everywhere. Well, I can even refer to my personal experience. Both in science and in business, there is a concept of a kind of wild transmission. In other words, If you communicate with scientists, if this scientist really discovers something, if he is really worthwhile, a school, a scientific school is formed around him. In the Soviet Union, there were a lot of scientific schools in different directions. There is a mathematician Kolmogorov, well, the School of Mathematics, Landau, the Landau School, there, Igor Evgenyevich, the Thomas School. Here in any other, maybe you even know there's engineering and so on. There is always a person who, as it were, learns the highest. And the fact that you communicate directly with him gives a boost. And you're starting to figure it out, too. In a normal school, if you like a school teacher in mathematics, you will know mathematics. If you don't like a school math teacher, you won't know her. That is, strangely enough, this is what seems to have nothing to do with something objective, but purely subjective. That you have to find a person who cooks in this. It does not necessarily have to be Einstein. In other words, your school teacher does not necessarily have to open the Yancey formula in a square there. But he still gives some kind of impulse, which is like this. I got it from Einstein. But if he gave you this impulse, yes, you, oddly enough, are doing well both physics and mathematics. Any sciences, if you personally communicate. But if this is not the case, then, as it were, a surrogate or replacement textbooks. Well, pay attention, you can buy a full set of textbooks from Moscow State University, MEFI there, I don't know, fees. You can study them. But this does not mean that you will get the same if you study at these universities. Because it's a plus. Plus, there's something else nonverbal, elusive. School. School live communication. That's why in any, if you also want to succeed not only in yoga, but in any science, look for the best in this science. Here you want physics, find out who is the cutting edge of physics there today. Go to him, whatever it takes. Yes, you know, it's like this. Go to the bottom, just stuff the cones. That's exactly the same here. Strive with all your might for physical communication. Well, I must also add to this, you see, yes, that now physical communication is being replaced in every possible way by an even bigger surrogate, namely the internet. In other words, we see another step appearing before our eyes in this South Diksha. That is, it is still being removed further. That is, then you could at least physically find a person there, like a lecturer at universities. Yes, he will give you a lecture. You will write down notes, yoga, then everything will be fulfilled. Then now you have, as it were, even further removed. Now you first look on the internet, and only then you go for physical communication. So, well, as if with this person. That is, well, like the predictions of Kali Yuga, in all its splendor. So, it's wonderful, so here we touched, among other things, Yoga Diksha. Probably, it is necessary to specify in the name as well. All information is openyoga-class.com. There will be courses on all yogas, including this one, I remind you. Recruitment for teacher training courses, where all this is studied, where we strive with all our might to combine all the best that is in ancient India with practically teaching already in our modern world. Well, finally, the project AITempUniversity.com. Follow the news there. And again, remember, at every opportunity, physical communication. Since we are at the festival, here is an opportunity to physically communicate, swim, study. Click the buttons. Ja, please, collect already.